All right, guys, so we're going to do a QA video here real quick. Someone is going to be working on a firearm, and so I'm going to paste in a reference image here, but they want to know how to do this like section here that has, they're kind of pre-planning out their topology they might use in that area. And that's fine. It's good to do that sometimes. And what we're going to do instead is, well, let me use that grid for just a moment. I'm going to line this image up. It's slightly rotated. We'll get it a little bit nicer. All right. Turn that opacity up. Now we'll turn that grid off so it's not in the way. And I'm just going to bring it down a little bit so we can work on this. Now, usually when you're doing firearms, by the way, it's best to do them straight up like this, not down on the plane, the floor plane anyways. Now, what we're looking at here is sometimes hard to understand like exactly what you're going to end up doing or how it's going to work out. So let's just create a cylinder first. Doing the barrel is a huge part of this process, right? And so let's get it going. Alt Z. It's going to be somewhere in this area. I don't know if I'm going to have the depth of it quite right, like the diameter, but it's somewhere in this area, right? So that's good to know. And then we can create a cube. We're going to do some booleans basically to get started with this kind of a project. We can overextend this a little bit if needed. Alt Q to switch between objects. But the main thing is that we want to get it going in this area. Let's start working it out, basically. So if you're going to be doing subdivision, it's usually less faces. If you're going to be trying to do some kind of remesh workflow, you're probably going to create more faces or more bevel segments and things like that, right? Or you can do them non-destructively, of course. Now, so what we're trying to figure out here first is this intersection. Like we're looking where the shapes would cross each other, right? So we know we're going to cut this out later, but we need to set the depth here to the point where like this is crossed in this exact area. So you can use your mouse as like a marker. You can see we're pretty close already. I don't know if I even need to adjust that just yet. So that's good. That's what we're looking for. I'm actually going to steal this geometry down here. Usually you Shift D, you duplicate, right click P, separate selection. And then you go to object mode, select it, and then you have that piece, right? Machine tools makes this much easier. Just hit 4, right? And we can rotate that. I think it's going to do something like this, right? I'm just going to extrude it out on, not rotate it. Okay. I guess extrusion was acting weird. There we go. Just do a boolean real quick. You see, it doesn't work out quite right. That's because the vertices are lined up with each other absolutely perfectly. The way we did that, you got to just slightly nudge it one way or the other. So G and X, right? And that'll do that like so. So now we have a good idea of this piece here, and we're going to run it all the way through. Simple enough. Let's mirror this over using machine tools. Grab this, Alt Shift X. Alt Shift exit, and then there you go. We got that going now. This front section, we're going to overextend these two just for a bit. You can see how this kind of falls apart here. So, all right. We're getting closer to the shape we need now, which is good. The top one here, we can do this manually, or we could do it with another Boolean setup. Sometimes it's still easier to do things manually. So if you choose to do that, you can do that. Now, I'm just going to go for it. See what we can do here. Looks like this front piece is going to back out this way. Okay. And it's going to be a little tricky, I think, on this one. It might be a little bit thicker. You can kind of see the intersection here. It's a little bit softer. But it's going to be like right in this area. Sometimes it's hard to see the things that you're working on. You can always use wireframe. So we can find, press Z and use wireframe there. So we can just find where we're trying to go to. And I think we're just going to bring it out a little on the Y to about there. Something closer to that, maybe. All right, which is great. If you ever want to do these manually without using a boolean, booleans are real easy, by the way. You can just make a cube, depending on the angle of the piece. You just rotate it in a spot, right? And this, the reason why you might want to do this is it stays non-destructive, right? So like, it's much easier to manage doing something in this manner. So like this edge gets maybe beveled, something like that, right? But in this case, it's actually not the shape that we're trying to create, but it's very similar. Okay, you can see how that works out. Maybe you got to move it around a little. Otherwise, we might have done something a little bit wrong here. Merge by distance. There you go. On the cutter. So a lot of times you can achieve shapes like that by doing something like that. But in reality, this is a little bit different. I'm just going to keep using the same shape. This one is doing something like a plane level change where the back segment is going up slightly like that. So booleans might help you get there. And, but you know, you can always just model it, which is what we're going to do. Sometimes it's easier. Start and stop of it, usually pretty important. You can do like the chamfer, like that. And if you're not sure about the exact angle, that can be a little bit problematic, but you're probably going to move things. You're probably just going to G and Y them around. And if you'll probably get it wrong, you'll probably have to redo it as well. That's just something that happens quite a bit. But you can see, we can start to work it out at least. So if we need, you know, 3 cuts in there or something, we can start to make this happen basically. And just kind of straight poly model it. Maybe do 3 here. It does look like it goes up a little bit, like kind of curves or something. It chamfers in here. Not real sure what's going on. I probably need a different reference image. Looks like this whole edge is probably just a little bit lower, maybe. Right? Something around here. And it kind of rounds out to the top slightly. Okay? And so we can correct the shape here as we go. Like that's the cool thing about it. It doesn't really matter. As long as we're very deliberate with what we're doing. Like this section here, we can probably just push it out. And we can just poly model it, right? And then later on, if we need that transition, we can bevel this. Or if we're going to use subdivision, it'll bevel automatically for the most part, right? So it's really easy to do. When you start working in this manner, and you start getting these things kind of going in the right direction, Control Shift S this and skew it. Okay. So you might have to hit X or Y or whatever to do that. But you can start getting control on it. That's great. It becomes much easier to work with, much easier to do when you have the proportions right. Like we know we're in the right ballpark. And usually you would leave it like this for a while because you're still going to do like maybe the front section, right? And you still got to add these little slants and stuff. And so, you know, you might go through this later on and like say Boolean union that, Boolean union this, and then now it's all one piece. You could take like another cube, pull it to the front, scale it down maybe. And where it starts to deviate in shape, there you go. And it's looking like something else is happening here at the top. Very similar though. Right. And we're going to have things that are wrong, basically, is what's going to happen. Every time we do these kinds of edits, we're going to get things slightly off, or it's not going to be proportionally correct. There's something going to be wrong, right? We might have put a cut in the wrong area. We got to move it around. And this is why you want to do it in this manner where it's more non-destructive, not destructive. This thing looks like it curves a little bit, so I don't know if I have the topo for that right now. Let's see. Nope. K and Y. And I'm going to align those right bottom, top, or something. There you go. There's a little bit of a curve shape going on. in this area. See that? Just bringing that bottom edge up a little bit gets us closer to the target here. It'd be nice to get that a little bit more precise. Okay. All right, now that we've done that, let's go ahead and make sure it's all one piece. Turn box cutter on real quick. I'm just going to slice the back off. So we're not worried about this area right now and focusing on it. We would want to cut all this in appropriately later on, which we could do right now, I guess, if we wanted. But this is basically our shape, right? We'd have to worry about like the way the front sight is made, the middle section and stuff too. But this is the main shape that we're looking at, I guess. And so we just have to work it out into subdivision now, right? If we're going to go with a subdivision workflow anyways. And so here's where it gets interesting, because like this area, we can see how we did our booleans, right? So we know we did this boolean here on this cutter. And if we pull it out just a little bit, it's going to change that depth there first and foremost. But sometimes just getting it to cut a little bit nicer is going to work out for you. And these matched here for the top and the bottom, but they don't really line up with the cylinders. So sometimes you got to think about how you're doing these pieces for the cylindrical parts. We should be able to work that one out, but just be careful with the verticals going into the cylinder as well. If you were really clever with doing booleans, you'll realize that we have like some little minor edges that they're close. They're not quite there, but they're close. If you get these things closer, your main mesh, you can add a weld modifier and they will weld together. Okay. So you can actually non-destructively create a subdivision model if you wanted to. The only hard part that's going to be is creating certain like quad fills and stuff. So, but you can eventually work these things out very cleverly, but it's very challenging to do. It's something fun to try, but it doesn't always work out super good. But the weld is basically a merge by distance. And as a result, you know, when we go through something like this and we're making all these cuts, you know, we can get a lot of this merged before we even, you know, send it or turn it into a destructive model, right? Even places like right here. But I think we're okay. So let's just duplicate the main shape, right click. So Shift D, duplicate, right click, convert to a mesh, and send it out. All right, so we'll just go ahead and work on this on its own. I won't worry about the other one now. But you eventually model something like this, and then you convert it into subdivision. That's the easiest way of doing it. You know, it's like block out subdivision. So a lot of people, you know, they say like, don't use booleans, and then they don't have any idea what they're talking about, because you want to use booleans if you can. And then if you need to clean things up and make them nicer, you see where we're going with this? We can do that. So we have a lot of little things we got to work out here possibly, but the best way to do this is converting big n-gons into quads. So KCA, use a knife tool, start cutting out what makes sense the most in kind of the right directions, and just start going from there. It's easier to sometimes quad things out than doing holding edges first. And in our case here, I think we'll be okay. And I'm going with the bottom ones for now, because I think I'm going to shift these ones around. And that takes practice to understand when you might do things like that or not, but you might do it at some point, so it's worth just seeing what's going on here. So we've isolated this whole area for the most part. Maybe we can add a couple loop cuts here, maybe 3, maybe do 3 up here. Eventually we can join these with J, just like the 2 verts. Like, it starts to become a lot easier to work with a lot faster. You do these, you know, maybe do these cuts that are needed. And then later on, when you have these big sections like this, you can just loop cut through there. Don't think too much about it later on. Until later on, anyways. We don't want to change the shapes of cylinders if possible. So, you know, when we have an extra edge somewhere like this and these don't quite line up, this can be problematic. We'll figure it out. We'll work it out, but they can be problematic, just so you know. Right now, I know that this edge is going to eventually travel like in this direction and probably go this way somewhere. and it's going to become like a holding edge basically of sorts, right? So that's great. Once you know that, let's just start working with it. You can do all that, merge by distance, dissolve an edge if you don't need it. This one here is creating an n-gon, and we probably don't need an n-gon. We don't need a little triangle either. So it's looking like we can do something like this. And we might have to work that out a little bit differently. Sometimes it's okay to use a triangle. It's not the end of the world to do that. It creates a pole. So if this subdivides later on, what's going to happen is that it's going to have an end pole right here. Triangles turn into end poles, right? That creates a pinching effect, and on a cylinder, pinching sometimes is very noticeable. So we might be able to get away with doing more edits there later. I'm not going to worry about fronts and backs for just now. It's no point. We haven't really set them up. Well, actually, we'll leave the front, but we won't do the back. So far, so good. This one's probably going to run something like this, if I had to take a guess. And probably you could do another one as well. So it's like an inset, basically. Quarter of an inset. When it mirrors, you got like a half inset. Very easy to do that one. This shape here is really throwing me for a loop. I probably should have looked at that before I converted it. You can make your cylinders slightly not cylindrical. So like that works. And we have a quad, which is nice. But it could be maybe a little problematic sometimes. I think we'll be all right with that one. You know, one of the things that most people don't realize about subdivision, while it might generate like really nice up-res and down-resable mesh that can deform, it's also one of the least accurate ways of modeling as well. So there's not a lot of like really good precision in it, I would say, as far as recreating like a real form or shape, something like that. All right, so we kind of got it going at this point, and basically most of this will start subdividing at this point, but it'll be kind of soft. We need to add holding edges, more or less. Just for simplicity's sake here, I'm going to grab this section. I'm just going to push it back, so we don't have to do any extra weird work there, hopefully. Some of these probably don't even need holding edges all that much, but some of them will. This section here, what I'm going to do is just inset it real quick. That's kind of like our holding edge there for it, right? And now we can start to determine KC, no, just KA on this one. We'll do the C. C cuts through, right? Just going to start trying to run these out like this and grid it up. You could try like a grid fill, but there might be a chance that it messes up. So by the looks of it, this is going to go somewhere like right here. But we'll need 2 additional cuts through this area so we can attach these. Okay. So sometimes it's hard to get used to doing this. And maybe you don't like the topology that you've generated when you do this. Like it's going to start pulling this edge pretty heavily because there's a lot of spacing in it. Right. So here's just a little cool tip. You select all of this, however you got to get a hold of it. I'm going to use cursor selector with C. Mouse click on it. And we got some extra edge stuff going on here. What's this? A double edge? Okay. Let's see if I can get a hold of that and delete it. Merge by distance. And let's try that again. I think we got rid of it now. All right. So here's a cool little way of dealing with this. We grab all that. We Shift H, hide everything else. Go to sculpt mode. We're going to use the slide relax tool. We're going to lock mesh boundaries. And now we should be able to grab this whole area, or hit Shift or hold Shift and click. We should be able to do this number. Okay, so we'll even that out automatically with that. And then we can just Alt H. Go back in edit mode if we want. We can leave that like so now. I don't think that's the best distribution of faces, perhaps, but it's decent enough. All right, so that one is pretty much taken care of now. This one here, we need some holding edges in a couple different areas. I think we can get away with some bevels. We should be okay with some bevels. We're going to bevel this whole section real quick. And I'm going to bevel right up to this point and do 2 segment. And you could leave it at 0.5 or you could try 1s. It's fine. I'm going to actually merge these to that one so we get this result. Okay. I went and did it a little bit further. Sometimes I do this because occasionally I like to pull them down, but it depends. This one we can probably just cancel out right here on that edge. No problem. Right. And the back side of this, I already knew it was going to do this. So this is kind of what's going on here. And that'll work there for that. As for the other ones, if we wanted to do more holding edges, we could do chamfers. We don't always have to use 2 segment bevels, right? There's nothing wrong with doing a chamfer, but in our case here, I don't think I would even bother putting an edge down here, okay? Like I could, and I could, you know, try to work that out again, kind of the way we did on the other section, but I might just do like a loop cut, press E, hit F if you need to, but make it even, and just do an extra edge loop there. That's going to act something like a chamfer. So when it subdivides, we get this result. So I'm going to subdivide it 3 times by hitting Control 3 in object mode. And now you can see how that's working out. Okay. This is why sometimes having those poles, when you create that, this triangle or this triquad, it behaves like a triangle because it has an end pole back in the backside of it. But it creates like a little kind of pinching point in here, right? Sometimes it's not too noticeable. Sometimes it is. In our case, I think it does okay, but you want to be aware of that. So that's why you would push it further down into this face by overextending it like I did at the start there. All right, now, so this is a little bit softer, which is nice. This is a little bit softer down here. We can actually probably tighten this one up just by shifting this down a little bit, maybe. All right, maybe something like that. If you needed this to be more round, obviously that's going to start flattening out now. So you might want to actually push that into a better position, perhaps. And you can tweak things like this all the time, and it's not unheard of. So, you know, you're trying to capture certain shapes or forms and be as accurate as possible, or at least make it look like what it's supposed to look like. You can do things like that. So if it doesn't flatten out, you know, don't flatten it out. But in that case, you could probably just add another loop cut, and that'll sharpen that corner up too. Or you can do like a bevel in that area, something along those lines, because this is still completely able to be beveled. We get something like this going. This kind of corner will fall apart. You can't just merge it like that. You have to pull these apart like this, right? And this one has to join to there somewhere, more than likely. Something like that. And then that will subdivide, but it's going to eat into it like this, right? So then this means the topology is not quite what we need, and we would need maybe like another holding edge here. You see? That creates another quad there. And yeah, there's little tricks like this all over the place. As you do more subdivision modeling, you're gonna realize it's actually really cool what you can get away with when you start focusing on a couple things. Setting up the basic forms and shapes you need first, figuring out how to do redirects. So redirects are really just like creating end poles for the most part. It's like subdividing a triangle or cutting a quarter of an inset. Like this is a redirect, basically, quarter of an inset. So we can do that if all day long, if we had an edge coming up from the bottom here. And those same things are used to increase resolution or decrease resolution, basically. So you can imagine like we wanted to decrease resolution in here. We're creating a half of an inset. Okay. These would be able to dissolve at some point, and we wouldn't even necessarily have those anymore. So it'd be like this, right? So we could reduce doing that. But if it was just a regular inset and we were working like this and we inset, it creates more topo, right? More edges, but it creates poles. These poles, these are your redirect poles. once you understand that and how you can break certain ones, like convex shapes, you can break into this kind of a shape here where the triquad works really well. And then that's convex, and then concave you do where they fan out is typically what happens there. So, but you can do it, and it's super useful. And yeah, so we would have to go through at this point and just continue adding holding edges if we need them. A lot of times you can do them with loop cuts. You can use existing topo and redirect or shift it around. You don't always have to do a new loop cut. In our case, we already had a cut going there, so we're good. In this case here, I think I'm just going to try beveling it first and see what happens. Because I could just do a loop cut. I mean, this, yeah, right, we'll have to work on that one. Maybe I just do one loop cut here. And it kind of works, but it kind of gets weird here now because of the pole. That's an E-pole, 5 vertices. And then the triangle creates an end pole when it subdivides. So you can see end pole, E-pole, right? Now, it doesn't quite work out the way I would want it to. So maybe I'd be better off taking this whole edge and just doing this, right? And then when you do that, it's like these edges are real dense here going up. That's not ideal sometimes. Well, you can always try collapsing these back down, maybe getting away with this at some point. That's a possibility. Otherwise, occasionally you can get away with it, but otherwise you start fanning these apart, right? And balancing it out, basically. And that's just how it's going to work out anyways. So hit the right keys here. I can actually move it. There you go. And that'll help alleviate some of the tension in there, that section. But we have something else going on apparently right here. I don't know what that is. A double, possibly. Oh, an interior face. Sometimes I accidentally create a face on the inside. Hitting the wrong keys or something. That happens. Looking for the handles here. Just delete the faces. Should be good. Back section somehow also apparently is closed up right there. All right, so it's getting there. It's a little bit better. We're just going to finish it out right here. I'm going to bring that all the way up. Okay. And I don't think this is going to work out quite right because of this here just dead ending like that, right? So we could possibly do this like this and then try to send these two forward maybe. It's going to be a little bit off if we do that like that. Maybe we push these back. See how that works out. Okay, yeah. See, it gets a little bit weird in there. And so another holding edge would actually be really nice. Otherwise, we'd have to figure out how to work these into this area, maybe, right? And we can do a triquad down here, right? So we could do that. And now, this whole section to the front goes to here. I actually like this topo up here. I don't really want to run another edge through here, but these are very big rectangles. They do need to be broken down a little bit more. So I'm not sure if I collapse up here in that manner, if it's the best, but I could work it out maybe later. But this also works out, so you just press J, join those two, symmetrize it all up. Right here, we have a, this is all quads, surprisingly, which is nice. But we might really want an additional edge in here. In the way it's going right now, that's actually not maybe quite what we want, is to have that quad like that. Maybe we want more like a triangle. I think for simplicity's sake, I would probably leave it the way it is. But if I needed more topo, and I absolutely did not want to start doing a bunch of weird surgery on that corner, I'd probably just inset it a little bit and then let it rock like that maybe. But you can see that's where things get a little bit iffy perhaps as well. So, you know, you can leave it alone. I mean, sometimes it's better just to leave it alone, right? There's definitely more we could do here as far as like running this edge. We could try pulling it forward a little bit further, like almost something like this, and maybe like into the to the corner there or into this side, right? So you would have to work something like that out, but that's a really minor thing at the end of the day, right? Oftentimes you can use a mesh like this that you've worked out to create additional details as well. So for example, if we needed a hole in here, we can use loop tools and do circle, something like that, right? So now we're at that point where we can start um, using our mesh to just create the other needed geometry. And if something is just like misaligned or something, you work it out, you know, push and pull those vertices around, cut them up, remove them, duplicate them, separate them, whatever you got to do to get it to work out. You can start doing, because these become a lot easier to manage or deal with. Sometimes it's actually kind of easier working with higher poly meshes like this to some degree. As long as they're kind of simple still, you know. Maybe just dip that down. So a lot of firearms have like really weird minor details like that sometimes. I'm not saying this is occurring on this one, but if you ever run into that situation, that might be what you need to deal with. Also, this whole thing might get extruded outwards, and we already extruded just a cylindrical piece. So this is where, you know, just realizing or recognizing at least that you can do things like this. Like we can combine these shapes together, even though we went too far with one of them, right? So like I could just take that, destroy that. We're probably going to combine these somewhere in here, right? Yeah, I'd say on these ones. All right, so probably don't need none of those interior faces, right? Delete those for a second. Yeah, but basically, you see where that's going? Now we're just doing good old modeling. That's it. But if you don't get those big proportions right first, a lot of times you're going to struggle. And it's not always going to be like a perfect model, even if you got the proportions right. Like you need to go through sometimes and do that first, and then try a subdivision or a quad mesh that you can subdivide, right? And if you fail at doing it one way, try to doing it a little bit different and maybe start it over. You might even have to redo your block out, because it's one of those things where like you don't always get it right, right? You might have used the wrong segment counts. You might have ran the topology wrong or destroyed something by accident during the process of creating something. It happens. You get used to it. You just redo it real quick and just keep moving. This should mostly work, but check this out. We have a little edge we need here. All right. And there we go. So just this one little edge here that's kind of I'm not too happy about. So we're just going to slide it down. Softens it up. And this one we could probably slide up a little. Let it soften that top side. So if you want those sharper, you know, you just keep them closer basically, right? Might be good to put another loop cut here too. And that's quad modeling, guys, subdivision modeling. It's pretty much goes something like this anyways. You know, as you're learning it, you're not probably going to do it super fast, and sometimes you'll make mistakes or errors. That doesn't need to exist. We can work that back out. It's kind of a weird topo in this area. Don't really need all of that like that. Maybe a couple quads here. And, you know, I personally like to use two quads like this back to back because it creates a half inset. So that's something worth knowing, I think. But the whole of the model now at this point, I mean, like, it's just tweaking for the most part and adding more details as needed. Because you can take a model like this, and then later on you add a subdivision or two to it, especially if you're doing these for bakes, right? You can work on something like this as well. You can even sculpt on these things if you wanted to. This is why you want to make squares, right? Instead of rectangles. So if you're planning on sculpting, doing these holding edges is actually kind of a bad thing. You might be better off just adding more loop cuts everywhere than trying to do anything special with them. So because sculpting on these guys, like if I try to smooth this area, for example, it might look okay, but it starts to fall apart at a certain point. It doesn't look usually that good. Okay, that one's actually not too bad. It's kind of laying apart. Sometimes some of them look very bad. Or if like you try to relax them or something. Like maybe they pinch together. I don't know. It's like a little weird things can happen with certain sculpt tools, like creasing, for example. You know, like you get like this weird banding effect. And when you subdivide, it might actually make it look worse. Okay. Because of the way the topos run. Although these ones aren't that bad. They're surprisingly doing okay. So just keep that in mind, though. It can happen. And so that's it, guys. So, yeah. 357 Magnum, I guess, example. I could go something like that. All right. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.